evening and welcome to the Gold News of Hollywood. Isn't that music lovely? That's part of Alfred Newman's musical score for The Bluebird. It's amazing, you know, Alfred Newman wrote that music in 10 days, the score for the whole film in 10 days, while he was working at MGM on Broadway Melody of 1940 and at RKO on The Hunchback of Notre Dame. That's one interesting achievement about The Bluebird. I have more to say about that, but let me say something about another film first of all. Tonight is a Shirley Temple night. I'm so thrilled to present The Bluebird, and I'm also very pleased about presenting for you later on tonight The Story of Seabiscuit, which was Shirley's second last feature. She's co-starred with Barry Fitzgerald and Lon McAllister, and may I say that the colour print of The Story of Seabiscuit is really exceptional. It's a beautiful looking film, and if you get your controls just right, then I know you're in for a good time later on tonight with The Story of Seabiscuit. Also, apropos of colour, may I stress at this stage, if you're not already aware of this point, that The Bluebird does not begin in colour, it begins in sepia. So don't rush for your controls when the film doesn't begin in colour tonight. It begins in sepia, but it will come to colour eventually. The Bluebird is particularly interesting for many reasons, one of them being that it's the first time it's been shown in colour on Australian television. Secondly, when it was shown in black and white some years ago, it was shown without its crucial opening sequence in sepia, which is important for the plot. Another reason why I think it's interesting about Bluebird is because of its star, Shirley Temple. Now, a lot of people were amazed when The Bluebird, particularly at Fox, when The Bluebird was not a financial success when it was first released. And I think the answer to this might be quite simple. You see, there's the feeling that Shirley Temple was always cute and lovable and warm and cuddly. In actual fact, one of the striking things about The Bluebird is that Shirley Temple, and not only in the opening sequences, is not a lovely little girl, she's a mean, selfish little girl and quite horrendous in her attitudes. And she gives, I think, a very good performance. She's a very talented girl and a very talented woman too, to have preserved her image so well over the years. For the only time, I think, ever on the screen, Shirley Temple, up to this point that is, had a mother and father and a brother. The brother is played by Johnny Russell, and Johnny Russell you may have seen in Jesse James. He played the part of Tyrone Power and Nancy Kelly's son in that film. They're a good team. They make a good sister and brother. You'll respond to them, I'm sure, tonight. Also in the cast, we have Russell Hicks, and with her back to the camera, unfortunately, Spring Byington playing the parents of Shirley Temple and Johnny Russell. The cast is very good in The Bluebird, quite frankly. I'm sure you're going to find many interesting people as the film develops, and I don't propose to enumerate who's who and what's what in this film. I don't want to spoil the surprises for all the young people who are seeing it for the first time. But I do want to draw your attention to two people, and seen here with Shirley Temple, we have Eddie Collins, whose characterisation is practically perfect in every way. And I'm not going to even voice the comparison that I would naturally voice at this time because, once again, I don't want to spoil the surprises. And also in this shot, we have Gail Sondergaard. Gail Sondergaard, who was the first actress to win a Best Supporting Academy Award for her role, her performance in Anthony Adverse, is brilliant. And quite frankly, Shirley Temple has a run for her money in this film with the competition she gets from Eddie Collins and Gail Sondergaard. The Bluebird is based, of course, on a play by the Belgian dramatist and philosopher Maurice Maeterlinck. The play was first produced in 1909. In 1911, the author, Maurice Maeterlinck, was actually awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. In the early 30s, he was made a Count of Belgium by the King of Belgium. He died in 1949, which is the year of The Story of Seabiscuit. I think you'll find his ideas, as expressed by writer Ernest Pascal in this film, are ever fresh and I think very well worth hearing and listening to and looking at for us all. I hope you enjoy The Bluebird. I hope you're enjoying The Bluebird tonight. It's quite a revelation. The special effects are brilliant. Part 2 is going to astonish you because in Part 2 is a sequence which I think one has to see again and again, and then you can't see how it was done, because this is movie-making brilliance at its best. Don't let anyone tell you that things are so much better now than they were then. They could do it then. Their imaginations were the only things that stopped them from doing more, I would say. But Bluebird's big sequence coming up is mind-bending. Incidentally, comparisons are inevitable, I know, with The Wizard of Oz. And if you haven't heard this story, then I hope you'll find this interesting. If you have heard before, please forgive me. Originally, when MGM planned to do The Wizard of Oz, Louis B. Mayer wanted to have Shirley Temple play Dorothy. As things turned out, Darryl F. Zanuck at Fox wouldn't lend her to MGM, so Judy Garland got the part, which turned out very well indeed. The Bluebird was 20th Century Fox's answer to MGM's Wizard of Oz, quite simply, and unfortunately it did not emulate the success of The Wizard of Oz. In fact, it was Shirley Temple's first financial failure. And I think that's a very sad thing, because it's a film that attempts to do much, say much, and I think for young people and for old, there are a few ideas beautifully expressed. And the last moment in this film tonight will give you such a glow that you'll want to see the film again. We shall return to the Bluebird in just a moment. I love the last moment of the Bluebird. It's very charming, isn't it? What a lovely film. It hasn't deserved a lot of the harsh critical comment over the years. Some theorists believe that Ernest Pascal's screenplay for the Bluebird, in fact, tidies up a lot of the thinking in the original play. The play's worth reading, mind you. I find it very interesting myself. And I think some of the ideas in that film are just as relevant to us now as they always were. By the way, Sybil Jason played the little girl with Shirley Temple at the end of the film. I think that was her last film. But Sybil Jason was quite popular, actually, in the late 1930s, working mainly, as I remember, at Warner Brothers. She also appeared with Shirley Temple in another one of Shirley Temple's great movies, The Little Princess, to advantage too, I might say. I hope you've enjoyed that tonight, and I find it interesting also to see Shirley Temple giving a performance that took her quite away from being just a lovely little girl. She was a very clever actress, there are no two ways about that. In a few minutes' time, it'll be my great pleasure to present for you The Story of Seabiscuit, which was Shirley's second last feature. She's co-starred with Barry Fitzgerald and Lon McAllister, and thereby hangs an interesting tale. And I would say, quite honestly, that The Story of Seabiscuit is one of the most beautiful colour prints I've ever seen for showing on television. Not only that, but it has something in common with the Bluebird that's rather odd. I'll tell you about that in just a moment.
This program was brought to you by Nissan Commercial Vehicles, the ones with more get-up, more go, more guts.
When you're at home, you're home on 10.
Good evening again. I hope you'll be pleased to see The Story of Seabiscuit. I think you will be, if you respond to lovely colour. And I said a few moments ago that this film has something in common with The Bluebird. Well, it's a rather trivial thing, really. The Bluebird started in sepia and went into colour, and this film starts in colour and actually goes into monochrome. So don't rush for your television set again and think something's gone wrong, when on two occasions it goes into monochrome. But it goes into monochrome for the purposes of authenticity, which adds a lot to the appeal of the film. Question, who was Seabiscuit? Well, I guess I can't tell you very much, even though a representative of the AJC was good enough to provide me with some facts about Seabiscuit's career. But he was a tremendous winner of many races, something like 33 races I think he won, and his winnings would have been heading pretty close, I think, to $500,000. But Seabiscuit also participated in a couple of races which have become legendary in American racing history, and these are recreated in the film tonight. One of them's recreated, one of them's shown for real. The Story of Seabiscuit is a fanciful recreation of Seabiscuit's life and career. It's really mainly concerned with three people associated with the horse, and they are so likeably played that you couldn't help but enjoy the film. Barry Fitzgerald plays Sean O'Hara, the trainer, the man who has faith in Seabiscuit, and it's a superb Barry Fitzgerald characterisation. If you've liked him in other films, e.g. Going My Way, then I'm sure you're halfway to enjoying his participation in The Story of Seabiscuit. Shirley Temple plays his niece, Margaret O'Hara. Shirley Temple is very lovely. How old would she be at this time? I would say Shirley Temple would have been about 2021. And she certainly looks charming, and her Irish accent may not fool anyone, but it is rather cute, and I'm sure you'll like that. And incidentally, Shirley's house where she lives while she's training to be a nurse, I'm sure is in Kings Row at Warner Brothers. Those of you who know Kings Row very well, just watch that, will you? And you might be able to verify it for me. Shirley's leading man in the film, apart from Barry Fitzgerald, of course, is Lon McAllister. Now, for those of you who may not know of Lon McAllister, may I say that in the 1940s, he was one of the most popular young stars. Lon McAllister had appeared in movies about 1936. He played in Romeo and Juliet, for example, with Norma Shearer and Leslie Howard, very minor part. And after several bit parts, including Gentleman Jim with Errol Flynn in the 1940s, he hit the big time in Stage Door Canteen and a film called Home in Indiana, the film that really launched Gene Crane and June Haver. Now, Lon McAllister was a top Bobby Soxer's idol in the 40s, but from the start he decided that he wanted to make money and retire when he was 30. He retired in the early 50s, only 3 years after making The Story of Seabiscuit. He was 29 years at the time. He had 2 apartment houses, a beach house at Malibu. He went around the world, he lived abroad, he has had a marvellous life, and he looks about 35 nowadays. Lon McAllister, a very charming young man. Shirley Temple, well, what more can I say? And Barry Fitzgerald. The supporting cast is not particularly large, but it's very good, with Rosemary DeCamp to advantage. I always like her. And a lot of amusing moments. And here's one scene in the film that I'm sure will amuse, well, those viewers particularly who are trying to diet. In this particular scene, we have Lon McAllister and Barry Fitzgerald, and the business with the hamburger and the chicken is very funny. I'm sure you're going to find yourselves irresistibly charmed by The Story of Seabiscuit.